sir. Good evening. This is the June 13th, 2013 meeting of the Jefferson City Planning and Zoning Commission. My name is Ralph Robinette. I am chairman of the commission and will preside over this meeting. We will now introduce the other members of the commission, city staff, and our council liaison, starting with Councilman Mahalovich.
Rick Mahalovich, Second Ward Councilman, liaison to the commission.
Bunny Tricky Cotton.
Dale Vaughn.
Mike Lester. Jack Deacon.
Dave Nunn. Chris Jordan.
Chris Yarnell.
Dean Dutoy.
Ron Fitzwater.
Shane Wade, city staff.
Eric Barron, city staff.
Janice McMillan, Department Director.
Jeremy Cover, Law Department.
The City Council authorizes 9 regular members and 3 alternates. Alternates are designated to vote upon the absence or disqualification of any regular members. A quorum of 5 members or alternate is necessary to conduct business. I hereby declare that a quorum is present. We have one of our regular members who is absent tonight, Bob Jard. Bunny, therefore you will be voting. Are there any members who wish to disqualify themselves or refrain from voting on any of the agenda items? Call for cases. We have case P 13009, 3625 Missouri Boulevard rezoning from C1 to PUD and preliminary PUD plan. Just want to know if there's anybody here to represent that proposal. Okay, Mr. Bates, thank you. Do you wish to continuance or you want to continue on tonight? We'd like to continue tonight. Okay. All right, we have no request for continuance. Okay, staff presentation, the format of the hearing, and the order of testimony. Staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to briefly describe the procedures of the Planning Commission. Excuse me. The proceedings in the meeting are being recorded, so I ask that when you speak, please step to the microphone and give your name and address for the record. After a brief introduction by city staff, the applicant and applicant's consultants and advisors will explain the proposal. The opening presentation by the applicant shall be limited to 10 minutes, and they shall be given 3 additional minutes for closing testimony if so requested. We will then ask to hear from supporters of the request. We will then ask to hear from any opponents of the request. We will then ask to hear from anyone else who wishes to speak on the request. And the testimony from supporters, opponents, or other interested parties shall be limited to 3 minutes each, and rebuttal testimony shall be limited to 5 minutes unless permission is granted by the Commission for additional time. City staff will then describe the proposal and make their recommendations on the request. In order to reduce the time necessary to hear an application, reference to printed material, including staff reports, applicable findings, ordinances, and/or statutes shall not be read into the record unless directed by the Commission. And the Commission will then close testimony from the floor. And the Commission will then discuss the proposal and then make a motion on the request. The form of the motion shall be positive, that is, the motion shall be made to accept the request as presented or with modifications, stipulations, or conditions. A final vote will then be taken, ayes in favor, nays opposed, and the chairman shall announce the results of the vote, specifying the number of votes cast in favor and the number of votes cast against. The following documents are entered as exhibits for all items under consideration at this meeting: the City Code of the City of Jefferson as amended, Comprehensive Plan and Land Use Map, the copies of applications under consideration, a list of property owners to whom notices were sent, the affidavit of publication of the public notice in the newspaper, copies of drawings, plans, and/or renderings under consideration, letters or memoranda from staff, the staff reports, the minutes of proceedings, letters, photos, memoranda, or other materials submitted by the public or the applicant, and the rules of procedure for the Jefferson City, Missouri Planning and Zoning Commission. And these items are a public record and are available for inspection in the Department of Planning and Protective Services or through the Office of the City Clerk. And please be advised that any items that are presented or otherwise received pertaining to the cases under consideration tonight become the property of the Commission. This includes any photographs, drawings, renderings, petitions, and letters.
Thank you. Having not received any requests for any continuation of the agenda, the tentative agenda, I would move at this time for the adoption of the agenda as printed. Have a motion and second to adopt the agenda as printed. All indicate in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. You also have in your packet the minutes from the May meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission, if you'd like just a minute to look those over. Looking for a motion. Have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as presented. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Opposed, nay. We have approved the minutes. In your packet that was mailed to you, you should have had copies of the communications that we received the past month. You also have a copy of a communication that was given to you this evening. I am not aware of any unfinished business we have. Therefore, we will go to the new business public hearing, case number 13009-3625, Missouri Boulevard rezoning from C1 to PUD and preliminary PUD plan. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be fairly brief and let the applicant's consultants explain their proposal, but I will orient you to the location of this specific request. Up on the screen is a location map with the 3625 Missouri Boulevard property highlighted. Just to point out some of the major roads, Missouri Boulevard runs through the map. Over on the far left-hand side is South Country Club Drive, which of course changes to Truman Boulevard. There at Highway 50, and Highway 50 is, you can see it along the top of the map. Hobbs Road is this road right here, and the property is more or less located at the southeast corner of Hobbs Road and Missouri Boulevard, excluding of course the Learfield building that is right there where the mouse pointer is. The zoning of the property is a C1, mostly C1 neighborhood commercial zoning. There is a pocket of PUD zoned property. That is a remnant from a previous development proposal that did not move forward, or was not moved forward by the developer. The developer chose not to build it. But there is as it stands today, a pocket of PUD zoning on the property. The proposal, the property, which is owned by the Lear family, is they are proposing, and the applicant is actually Corwin Automotive Group, so they are applying for, on behalf of Corwin Automotive Group, to develop the property as a vehicle sales lot. To do that, they are proposing to rezone the entirety of the property from the C1 neighborhood commercial zoning to a PUD, planned unit development, so that the entire property is PUD rather than just that small pocket. And then also to for approval of a preliminary PUD plan. There are a number of different items on the preliminary PUD plan. I'll let the consultant go through them each and describe the proposal in its entirety. I do have a 2011 air photo of the property, which gives a little bit of an idea on what the property looks like from the air. There is an existing driveway entrance off of Missouri Boulevard that was put in place several years ago. and much of the property was graded at some time in the past. And then also I have the preliminary PUD plan, which should be in your packet. And there are also copies of this drawing up front here for anyone who would like a closer look. With that, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to turn it over to the applicant's consultants.
Okay, do we have any questions of staff at this time? Just to refresh our memory, that PUD that we approved, was that a hotel, the original one?
Yes, it was for a hotel. It was for a full-service Holiday Inn, and it was approved. It was approved through the city council as well, but did not. The developer chose not to move forward with the project, and the property was never sold to them. So it was always held by the Lears. So,
Thank you. Who is here to present this case this evening? Step forward and please give us your name and address, please, for our records.
Drew Corwin, 909 Sherwood Drive, Jeff City. I'm going to give just a brief introduction to the company, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mike Bates from CMPS to go over a little bit more of the details of the project. The Corwin Automotive Group is a family-owned and operated business. We've been in business since 1914, so almost 100 years. We're currently operating stores in North Dakota, Montana, and Missouri. We've been operating in Jeff City since the fall of 2010 when we purchased the Honda and Hyundai store. 1 year later, in the fall of 11, we purchased the Nissan store and moved Nissan in with Hyundai. So right now we're operating really 3 dealerships in 2 locations. If anyone's ever been to either one of the facilities, space is a major, major concern for us. This is why we're applying for the rezoning, C1 to C2, and preliminary PUD plan to move our Honda store to the Hobbs location. Our plan is to move our Nissan store out of the Hyundai store into the old Honda location and then leave Hyundai where it currently is right now. That way we would have 3 completely separate facilities. Right now we employed just shy of 150 employees. We think when we separate the 3 of them, conservatively we're going to add somewhere between 50 and 60 jobs to the community. We're here tonight to answer any questions you guys have if I can't answer them. Like I said, Mike from CMPS or Kerry Gamfer from Architects Alliance is also here, and he could get into more of the specifics on materials or square footage of the building or different types of stuff like that.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions of Mr. Carwin at this time? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mike Bates, Central Missouri Professional Services, 2500 East McCarty Street. We provided 2 additional visuals. One is an overall view of the site plan to complement the packet information. The building footprint is highlighted in blue, and Brian McMillan, our senior project manager, will be going into some of the detail in regard to the site plan specifics. The 8.511 that we passed out, there was a little bit of question about where the paging or speaker system would be. It's truly designed to be in front of the building, the service area. So that 8.5 by 11, Brian will cover that, and it actually shows where any speakers would be planned, and they would be pointed away from the neighborhoods. Eric's report does a good job of providing the history of the site. I will provide a little bit of background information. We actually have worked in this area since 1972. It's been an evolving process all the way from Wildwood Drive, the Lowe's, the Wildwood Crossings, the property south of that. And in 2005, the Lear family came up with a development plan that was fairly intense, and it included mixed use, condos, commercial, retail, financial institutions, a consideration for a restaurant. At that time, in order to proceed with looking at the viability of the development, we actually conducted or had conducted a traffic impact study. As a result of that traffic impact study, improvements were made to Missouri Boulevard, anticipating that that development would move forward, which it never did. It actually constructed the additional lanes and the entrance that Eric referred to that would be the primary access to the site. In 2008, there was interest by a developer to put a hotel here. That was a challenging project. There was a lot of discussion with the neighborhood. Eventually, due to the height of the building, I believe, and the nature of it requiring a C1 underlying zoning district, a PUD parcel was developed. As a part of that process, the other C1 uses were going to be limited, and that was a part of the negotiating process with the city, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the neighborhood. That was developer-driven and was never implemented, which brings us to date now and to a plan that we're going to present tonight that we think offers the best opportunity for the development of the site and the least impact on the neighborhood. When Mr. Corwin approached the design team, that does include Architects Alliance, Central Missouri Professional Services, and several other sub-consultants, our first reaction was this has potential, but it has some challenges too. And one of the challenges was that to ever present a plan like this, we believed it would have to be a full PUD zoning, allowing only this use. Basically saying the developer is proposing to do this, and the neighborhood is guaranteed that whatever is constructed will be this. So with that in mind, we decided to proceed farther. There was farther with the project. There was a brief meeting with city staff, and early on in the process, we believed it was important to make contact with the neighborhood. So as a part of that, and we were, with our experience with the site, we had identified some general concerns that we felt would be important. Of course, Missouri Boulevard traffic is always going to be number one. Stormwater is a problem, and with most every development we undertake in Jefferson City. Buffering, because of the nature of the commercial use and the adjoining residential facilities. Hours of operation is always a concern because drive-throughs are basically going to be 24/7. And setbacks and floor area ratio. The ordinances have very specific requirements in how much footprint you can put on a specific site. So as I said early on, it was determined to initiate contact with the neighborhood. On April 4th, an invitation was extended to the neighborhood, and I think we had about 40 in attendance. Mr. Corwin and the design team were there to present the concept plan, to give them some first-hand information in regard to the site, and also to gain their input back as to what changes or considerations we might give them in the site development process. That was followed with a smaller meeting on May 2nd. That meeting was with, I think it was 3 or 4 committee members, so to speak, of the neighborhood to discuss what changes were being considered and what was being implemented. And then a follow-up meeting was held on May 7th in the neighborhood. And as a part of that process, we actually sent a survey crew to the site to stake the common property line, which over the years as the area is developed, the property line wasn't really visible, to stake the infrastructure, and I'm talking about the back of curbs for proposed parking lots, and then to actually stake the building. So while it's a wooded area, you could actually walk in and say, okay, this is the southwest, this is the southeast corner of the building. So we went through that process, and as a part of that, we were continually refining the site plan as we went along. We shared that with the neighborhood. We believe this project has several specific advantages, and one, first and foremost, is that it establishes the entire development, which is a little bit unusual for a developer to propose this, and the concern is they don't know what's going to happen. But in this instance, we've spent 3 months actually looking at it and saying this is specifically what we're proposing and we're satisfied with it. That gives the neighborhood assurances that less desirable activities won't happen. And I will mention, and I'm going to say that I think the developer, we routinely see people that want 10 gallons in a 5-gallon bucket. If you look at the site, it generally runs north to south from Missouri Boulevard, and there's an L shape that attaches to Hobbs Road. Many people that we work with would have viewed that as an opportunity to create 2 commercial lots fronting on Hobbs Road, basically creating office or some type of retail in the C1 neighborhood commercial district. but that wasn't the intent. The intent is not to maximize return on investment, so to speak, from the land being purchased, but to come up with one composite specific use. In regard to traffic generation, we understand there's peak hour Missouri Boulevard traffic. It exists over several miles in our community. One of the things that we think support this development plan is the fact that the original traffic impact study, the mixed-use proposal, we are actually less than 30% of what was anticipated with that development. I want to restate that because the nature of what we're doing is actually, from a traffic standpoint, far diminished. Buffering, the city has very specific requirements and the type of buffer yard. The plan was developed to leave as much intact of the natural environment as possible, and Brian will go over some of the features that have been implemented to protect some of that. But in addition to that, a full landscaping screen along Hobbs Road and the common property line behind the building is put in as a specific part of the plan. That includes 6-foot ball and burlap evergreens that are planted on a 6-foot center. So as you look at that, we're going to screen Hobbs Road, and then we're going to screen the adjoining property owner, or the adjoining common property line that's to the south, and that is being done far beyond any of the city's requirements. There will be, and Brian will talk about that, a Versalock wall that's being constructed to protect a drainage area that would actually preserve some of the natural growth. Lighting, the city has a very specific lighting requirement. Recently it was modified for this type of use. The intent is to use the full cutoff lights. The lights on the area adjoining Hobbs Road are a lower level than the main display lot, and they will be full cutoff that will not shine into the adjoining neighborhood. In regard to setbacks, the building footprint and the floor area ratio is less than 10%, but in regard to setbacks, they far exceed any of the city's standard minimum requirements. So we think this is an opportunity. One of my concerns is that there are so many other types of developments that wouldn't be complementary to this neighborhood. One of my concerns is we're just very hopeful that this goes forward, because it's always going to be a challenge for this type of infill development. And we think this is a great opportunity for a local businessman to grow his business and to put to rest the concerns and the issues for the neighborhood about what's going to happen on this 11+ acres. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'm sure there are things that I meant to cover and I didn't, and if you allow, Brian McMillan will cover some of the site-specific details in regard to stormwater and layout.
Okay, does anyone have any questions of Mr. Bates at this time? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hello, I'm Brian McMillan with Central Missouri Professional Services, 2500 East McCarty Street. And as Mike said, I'll briefly describe the site itself and how we envision it working. I've got a pointer, but it's hard to point to two different ones at the same time. But basically, if it'll work. Basically, the main entrance How's that work? Oh, there we go. All right. Basically, this will be the main entrance, and that entrance is in place today. As Mike mentioned, it was done as part of the proposed proposed retail development for this area. And this entrance includes a left turn lane coming from the east. It includes a right turn drop-off lane from the west. Also, we installed a right turn drop-off lane at Hobbs Road at this location, and added a left turn lane at that location also. So we envision this as the primary entrance. It's a very wide entrance. I believe it's 32 foot back to back, and very comfortable 3 lanes at the top. And that entrance will continue down all the way to the front door of the dealership. So it makes a very nice, wide, and I think it's going to be the place that people are going to want to drive. It also includes a sidewalk that runs parallel with the driveway. We of course have some display lot in this area. Right here is the existing Learfield building. This arc here is their parking lot. And then there's a little building here I think contains some communication equipment. This area here is part of their property, and we envision probably possibly a water feature or a little display area with some landscape rocks up at the corner to kind of add to that area. It's really too narrow to do anything in that area. Plus, there's a lot of utilities underground in this area, which restrict us from doing a whole lot of cutting of the existing grade to make a lot of changes in that area. As you can see to the east of the entrance, we have very little display lot in this area, which is not the most desirable situation for the owner, but the Corps of Engineers has indicated that we've got to stay out of this creek, if you want to call it that, drainage area. The Corps, it falls under their jurisdiction. So that's why we've kind of stayed out of this whole area here. And that creek comes down here and it meets up with another drainage ditch, and it comes into a pretty nice sized creek in this area and continues on down stream eventually towards Edgewood Drive. The city has constructed a regional detention basin in this area, and Mike briefly mentioned stormwater. The stormwater of the existing site basically goes two directions. There's a ridge that kind of comes off here and runs down and back up to the Learfield building. And so right now there's an existing drainage ditch to the south in this area that goes down towards the residential area. And then, of course, everything on this side of the ridge goes to this area that I was just discussing. What the city envisions us doing with this is taking all the stormwater to this direction, to this creek here. So it'll take it completely away from the residential area, and most likely they'll have less stormwater going to than they do now. So that'll be an improvement to any issues that they might have downstream in this area. And so all the stormwater will be taken this way and dumped into this creek. We will check some of the downstream capacities to make sure we're not causing any problems in that area, but then it will go to the regional detention basin. So as we move around the site, this is a large display area here, vehicle display. This also is a vehicle display area. The building will set down quite a bit lower than Missouri Boulevard. It's actually about 15 feet lower than Missouri Boulevard. It's actually about 22 feet lower, I believe, than Hobbs Road. Some people think, oh, that's really low, but a similar situation is if you were over at the Capitol Mall and at the entrance to Hy-Vee and looking at JCPenney, that's almost the exact same elevation difference and same distance away from the road would be from Missouri Boulevard to this building. So, and that, when you look at that, it almost looks flat. So, for the most part, it'll seem almost flat with Missouri Boulevard. But basically, as I mentioned, this is the main drive-in, and I've kind of shown a path. This would be the truck path. So delivery trucks and car delivery, they're able to come in and go around the building and come back out this way. Our goal is to keep vehicles off of Hobbs Road because we do have an entrance over here. We did start out with two entrances off of Hobbs Road, and after meeting with the neighborhood, that was not desirable. It's desirable to have no entrances at all over there, but with the road right there, I think for safety and for fire truck access and different things like that, you almost need another entrance over there. I did widen the entrance at the top a little bit to accommodate a truck. While we want delivery trucks to come here, you don't have control over delivery trucks, and you never know where they're going to go, so I want to make sure that they can turn into the site without having to go down to the net residential area to turn around and come back. So this widened entrance at the top does accommodate that, should a truck stray on the wrong path. right here is the building footprint. And if you'll notice here, it's hard to see on this drawing, but we've got a fence, a fence in this area right here, and we also got a fence right here. That's a 6-foot tall fence, and it's gated at this location, and there'll be a gate here, and then there's a gate here. And what that does is kind of separate off the work area from the public vehicle display area. And we felt that was important to do to keep people from driving around back here. You know, if somebody was looking at a car on a Saturday night, that's going to be gated off. So they won't be driving back here close to the residential area. But those gates will be controlled by the owner, and of course they'll probably be open during the day during business hours. But that does help provide a little bit of extra security in this area. I mentioned this is the main building footprint in this area. This here is also a building, and it's a detail shop. It's basically just a long building with garage doors that enter off the road, and it's provides a place for the vehicles to be cleaned and whatnot. This also provides a buffer between this property and this area. This is a very sensitive property, and we really don't want people to be able to see it down there. And this building will have no windows on the back side. It's basically just from below you'll just see the back of a building, if you can see it at all through the trees. And then we'll also be providing a fence in this area to also screen from that area. We've limited the amount of parking behind the building to keep down to a minimum the activity in this area. We've heard lots of comments about why can't we move the building up. When we move the building this way, we're going to have to do something for the displaced parking, and so that would probably end up being back here, so that would create more activity behind the building. So we feel that this is the best compromise as far as keeping less activity behind the building. So, and as I mentioned, this fence here, and this will all be like service area where the service cars, basically if you're coming to get your vehicle serviced, you'll come in and go straight in one of these 3 lanes. There's 3 lanes in this area. Then they'll take your vehicle into the service area, which runs east-west. There's no doors on the back of this building at all, so you're not going to hear ratchets or tire things, power equipment going out these back doors. These doors will be closed on the ends of the building, and they'll open up because this is a climate-controlled area, and they'll be opened up when somebody's driving in and out. So, so basically, you'll come in for service. They'll work on your vehicle. They'll probably bring it over here, park it, and then when it's time to pick up your car, you'll come in here, and they'll come get your vehicle, bring it in, and you'll pick it up in this area, and then you just drive straight out. You'll be heading that direction. So that's kind of the site in a nutshell. There is a retaining wall in this area, and this retaining wall is basically being put there to minimize the amount of disturbance to the existing vegetation and trees in this area. If we didn't have it there, this fill slope would extend all the way to the property line, and to meet the code requirements, we would be planting a buffer yard on that slope, but it would still displace a lot of the vegetation. So we've put this retaining wall in to help keep a buffer here. And in this area here, you can't see, but there's a condominium in this area. And when Mike mentioned the night we met out at the site, we walked over in this area, and this wall used to extend straight across. We've basically turned this wall and pulled it away, so that leaves a lot more natural buffer area in this location. But that wall will basically be 0 elevation, and it'll get down to about 10 to 12 feet in the middle, and then it basically goes to 0 elevation at the west end. And there's also a retaining wall in this area. We're kind of cutting into the slope. This drive will be up with Hobbs Road, and it'll go down to the site downhill. Then there's another wall here that will basically separate off the grade of the existing Learfield property with the lower grade that we've cut in. The goal is to balance the site. As I mentioned, the ridge is right here. We'll be basically excavating the material and moving it into the low areas on either side, and with balancing the site, that'll minimize the amount of dump truck traffic that'll be on the city streets and whatnot. So, is there any questions on the site plan here? I'll go to the next sheet and go over the landscape briefly, but before we move.
Yes, I think we have a question, Mr. McMillan.
Brian, I've got a couple quick questions. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you mentioned that the road coming into the property off Missouri Boulevard would be approximately 32 feet wide back to back.
Yes.
So from back of curb to back of curb is 32 feet, which explain to me, like on a normal roadway in somewhere in Jefferson City, how does that pair up to a road as far as, a true city street? I mean, to me, that seems very similar to the size of a city street.
That's a typical, probably residential street width that would have parking on both sides of the street. You can get down to a 27-foot back-to-back on some streets, but which would allow parking on one side of the street, I believe. But basically, that's a typical residential street width.
So in your opinion, then, if that roadway is approximately 32 feet wide, I know going down Missouri Boulevard and all the dealerships that we have, I mean, they do have to let vehicles off the semis as they're being delivered. Are you all envisioning that they'll pull in off Missouri Boulevard somewhere and then unload those vehicles on that street or somewhere on the facility, so we're not on Missouri Boulevard and we're not on Hobbs, doing that because it's a less traveled roadway?
Mm-hmm. We've designed it so they can do that.
Okay. Two more questions then. You mentioned the detail shop in the back corner back here that's behind a fenced area. Is that detail shop going to be a part of the Coronado Group and be for their facilities and not a secondary business that they're out promoting and getting more vehicles, coming? Let's say I can take my vehicle in there to have it detailed, or are they going to be renting that out to someone else who has a secondary business, where it's not, theirs?
I'll try to answer that, and Drew can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think their anticipation is right now when vehicles come in or traded in, they have to send them out to other sites around town. Mm-hmm. I think he said they use about three or four different detail shops right now to keep up with the demand, and this will be just for their use.
Okay. So the hours of operation and the vehicles will all still be under their control and
right.
This whole plan. The last thing that I have is, in looking at the site and driving it, Learfield has an existing lower parking lot. From what I can tell from the site plan and all that, is that parking lot, looks like it's a part of this plan, and is that driveway going to be cut off to Learfield, or what's the situation with that?
At this time, that parking lot will go away. It's basically that parking lot has a drive that comes down and is located in this area. We'll cut off that driveway up here at the property line, and that parking lot will be removed.
Learfield's still going to have enough parking and everything like that from what?
Yeah, I believe, according to Andrew, he's saying yes, but that parking lot was actually put in when the Lears had a state office building in the basement.
Right.
I did the design for it, so I remember it well. That state office building required a large amount of parking, and they had enough on site to suffice it.
Right.
The square footage per code, but that state agency required more, so that's why that parking lot was constructed.
Okay. Just want to make sure that's the best way I remembered it, and from driving that area quite a bit, it looks like that parking lot is not hardly ever utilized. So.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions? Dale?
I got a couple questions. One pertains to the lighting in the parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
I know in previous planning and zoning meeting we had with Lowe's lighting, at certain times they had it kind of go down a notch. Is that the same thing that'll happen in this parking lot, or is it going to be like? I also know that at the intersection of Ellis and Tanner Bridge, the city has LED lighting, and it's not as it's bright, but it's not as intrusive, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, the plan is to have the lights cut down to probably 50% or less after business hours. Of course, during business hours, you want it lit up to display the vehicles. But when the when the dealership closes for the evening, they'll have it cut down to less than 50%, I would say. And that's also an energy savings. I mean, a lot of people are doing that to help save energy costs. So yes, that will happen.
The next question I have is for city staff. I was reading the correspondence from the attorney, I think, and he was concerned about there being too much traffic on Missouri Boulevard off of Hobbs Road. Do you see any requirement for a stoplight there? Do you see there being a major impact where people can't pull out onto Missouri Boulevard from Hobbs Road?
Well, I might be jumping a little ahead here, but okay, yeah. Could we hold that question till the end? Thank you.
If I could just mention briefly that Missouri Boulevard is a state-controlled street, so the city, anything we do has to be approved by MoDOT, and the problem with that intersection is the South Country Club Highway 50 interchange.
Too close.
It's too close, and they're actually, we've received a letter from MoDOT that they're going to look at improving the signal timing on that this year, and then in the future look at what they can do to make better traffic flow.
That's all the questions I have.
Any other questions at this time?
Yes.
According to the plan, it looks like we have anywhere along I guess it's the southern part, the condominiums and some of the private family or anywhere from 8 foot to down to 25 or 6 foot natural buffer. A little evergreen buffer.
That's correct, and I was going to go over that real quick after we got done. If we go on to the next sheet, sheet PUD2, I'll kind of go over that. Back to here. Basically, the detail here shows that there will basically be the curb line here where we're filling, and a little bench, and then it'll slope down to meet natural grade, and that would be this line here is kind of where the natural grade starts everywhere. And so that buffer would be planted on that slope. And we're looking at, as Mike mentioned, 6 foot tall evergreens with a 6 foot spacing this way and 12 foot spacing in this direction. And so they would basically, instead of putting them in one line straight across, we'll offset them a little bit. And so it'll be right. So instead of having the space between each one, there'll be one behind it. So we'll have 2 rows for that buffer. And that buffer will basically start at this entrance up here outside of the 35-foot visual clear zone, which we have to keep for safety. And it'll basically extend down here to the corner, and then it'll basically go along the curb line in this area. We put it up at the curb line, so as you're looking up for most of the property, you'll be, those trees are going to be taller, essentially. If they were down at the property line, you could stand there and look right over the top of them right now until they grow up. So putting them up at the top will provide that buffer immediately. So, yes. And trying to think if there's anything else to cover. As I mentioned, that's the buffer, the evergreen buffer that we're proposing, and then that's also combined with this natural buffer. So we've given dimensions in this area showing that natural buffer, and as I mentioned, this retaining walls being put in to help increase that natural buffer. And so we're trying to keep as many of the existing trees along this side of the property as possible. And then, of course, as I mentioned on the east property line, we'll have a little bit of a fill slope in this area, and this building will provide the buffer here, and so this will be the natural buffer line here. So we've got quite a bit of property that's not going to be touched. And of course, with the landscaping plan, we also show typical shade trees. A typical parking lot, 35% of it needs to be shaded. Car dealership's a little different because you only really need to shade the areas that are employee and customer parking and like the service parking. So we basically provided trees that would shade the those areas. Any more questions about that?
Any more questions of this, Mr.
If I could just ask one.
Sure.
Signage on Hobbs Road.
We are not proposing any signage on Hobbs Road.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Is this on? Kerry Gamfer with the Architects Alliance, 631 West Main Street. And I'll just make a couple of comments about the building. It's about a 35,000 square foot footprint. It's pretty commensurate with the other office buildings that are east and west of it. There's 4,000 or 5,000 square feet upstairs for a total of about 40,000 square feet. The building is primarily driven by national branding standards, so it is a very high quality building. You can already see that in the two facilities that the Corwins already own. But Honda also has its own national standards. That'll be a combination of glass, aluminum composite insulated panels, and masonry. So it is a very high dollar per square foot. It's quite an investment. Brian mentioned the service bays. This will be pretty state-of-the-art in terms of the service bays. The best example I can give comparing state-of-the-art versus more traditional is if you think about Riley Chevrolet, though you see a lot of garage doors there. That's pretty traditional. That's what we've always had for dealerships. That building was recently expanded and continued that same footprint because the building was already like that. Riley Toyota is completely internal. You drive the cars inside the building. So it's state-of-the-art in terms of exhaust out of the building and conditioning. This building will be the same. The cars are driven on the north side coming from Missouri Boulevard into the building and then serviced at whatever bay they go to, and then they will exit on the ends of the building east and west. So again, no big bank of garage doors on the back or anything like that. There's just the three on the front. They drive in and then they exit out the ends of the building. There are a couple of high windows to allow natural light to save on lighting and utility costs inside the building, but otherwise no doors on the south side of the building. Other than that, I'll just be free to answer any questions anybody has about the building itself.
Have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who wants to speak in favor of this proposal? Okay. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition to this proposal? No one wants to speak in opposition to it? I'll close the public hearing then. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the combination of the written staff report as well as the presentation by the consultant has touched on just about all of my major topic points. I could certainly answer any questions anyone has. Is there any part of the plan that anyone has doesn't quite understand?
Let's go to
fully?
the engineering report, and then maybe we can
Okay.
combine our questions at the end. Engineering?
I'll just briefly go over a few things that weren't touched on as far as infrastructure goes. In regard to sanitary sewer, there is an existing sewer main on the site, and no additional main construction would be needed. As I believe the consultant had indicated, the sidewalk is being proposed along Missouri Boulevard and also along the frontage of the proposed development property on Hobbs Road. And also, as far as the consultant had indicated, stormwater drainage, we have reviewed that plan and are in concurrence with the proposal as far as taking the drainage to the east main draw and then to the, down to the regional detention basin, which is to the south and to the east of the property on the end of Knipp Drive. In regard to traffic impact, as they had indicated as well, the main driveway will be on Missouri Boulevard, with the secondary driveway furthest to the north on Hobbs Road. In regard to the improvements that had been made previously, those had been made in anticipation of the 2005 traffic study that was submitted. In that study, the trip generation that had been indicated was a certain level based upon the development being retail, general office, and a bank. They updated this proposal for traffic, and the numbers for trip generation significantly were reduced compared to what was proposed initially. What was proposed initially, those improvements had been made and are in place today. We did receive a letter from MoDOT that was submitted to the consultant that indicated that no additional improvements would be needed for the trip information that had been, the vehicles that would be generated from this site. As far as utilities, as Brian had indicated, there are a number of utility mains along Missouri Boulevard, all fire hydrants, lighting, and other utility services would need to be put in accordance with city requirements and standards. Also, going back to the traffic again, MoDOT in that letter had also indicated that that they hope to look at the timing, or plan to look at the timing of the signals at the interchange this year in hope of improving the traffic flow with, in the future, potential improvements at that interchange. I'd be happy to answer any questions that any of the members may have.
I have a question. What was the issue that the Corps of Engineers had with the creek? Isn't that just coming off the highway?
The Corps regulates any larger streams and natural drainage courses throughout the city in regard to fill or to disturbance. And when you are developing the property, they have certain regulations that they take a look at, and so in regard to actual development of those areas, there's certain restrictions that can occur once you get to a larger size drainage facility, and that is in place in various different locations across the town. So.
Gotcha.
Jack, did you have a follow-up question on the traffic light, or that answered that for you? Okay. Any other questions of staff? Yes, Chris?
I have a couple. And actually probably for Brian. Are you showing, am I understanding you showing curb and gutter all the way in? Off of Missouri Boulevard?
Off the driveway?
Yes.
Yes.
With the sidewalk?
Yes.
Okay.
You'll have cover and gutter on both sides, and then on the east side will be a little green space with a sidewalk, and then curb and gutter along the display lot.
Okay, thank you. I have one more for staff. Could you explain or help refresh my memory what could go into C1?
Well, there are a lot of permitted uses within the C1 neighborhood commercial zoning district. Probably the one that would have the most impact would be a drive-through restaurant. A drive-through restaurant is permitted in the C1 district. General retail is permitted in C1. Drive-through banks, restaurants, including restaurants serving alcohol. Things like bars, gas stations are conditional uses of the C1 district.
other questions of staff?
Just very briefly regarding the staff recommendation. As I'm sure you've heard me say before, the PUD district is very useful in accommodating unique development circumstances and in providing a higher level of protection to adjacent property owners through the use of things like buffer yards and restrictions on the use. And the particular PUD plan that they're proposing includes a lot of those elements: the buffer yard restrictions, restrictions on the specific type of use, a little bit more of a detailed lighting in terms of not allowing the display type lighting toward the rear of the property, and not permitting any signage along Hobbs Road. And through the combination of that and the rezoning, staff does support the proposal, both the rezoning of the property from C1 to PUD and the preliminary PUD plan. There is a recommended form of motion at the bottom of the staff report. There is one outstanding item, and that was clarification of the note regarding the speaker paging system, which you'll notice within that recommended motion. Unless anyone has any other ideas, I might propose that the handout that was handed out today, if the members are in agreement with what's shown on that, to refer to it, and that the speaker system shall be installed according to this handout. And that should resolve that one speaker system item, clarifying it. Other than that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Okay, I believe Mr. McMillan explained where the speakers were going to go. Are you happy with that? You bring it up here. I think he addressed it.
Yes.
So you're happy with that? So do we need to have that in the motion also?
I think yes, because it's...
So you want to do it in two motions?
One motion for the rezoning and one for the preliminary PUD plan, yes. And the within the preliminary...
Caveat of the clarification of the speaker system?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
You happy with that?
Yes, and I did forget to cover that, and I can do that just briefly. Basically, we're proposing 2 speakers on the front of the building, and those speakers are essentially for people who are having their vehicle serviced, and to basically call Mr. McMillan, your vehicle's ready to in the service area. It's not for the salesman. Right now, Mr. Corwin's indicated that cell phones are primarily used by all the salesmen, so if they need to get a hold of one of them and they're way out by Missouri Boulevard, that's going to be the method to get a hold of them. But we do propose 2 on the front of the building, 1 out in the middle of the large parking lot on the east side, and that would be directed towards Missouri Boulevard. So we do not propose any speakers to be directed to the west or to the south or east. It'll all be towards Missouri Boulevard.
And just for the benefit of the people in attendance, I'll try to point at the locations of each of the proposed speakers. One right there, pointing in that direction, pointing toward Missouri Boulevard. Yes, thank you. One right there. And then a third one within this parking lot, all of them pointing north toward Missouri Boulevard.
Okay, that will be in the form of the motion, but it seems like that everyone's got it worked out, right? Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, the chair at this time will do it in 2 motions. Would entertain the first motion.
Mr. Chairman, if you're ready for a motion, I'll take a stab at it. And you want to do them separately?
Let's do them separately.
Okay. I make a motion to approve the request to rezone the C-1 neighborhood commercial zoning portion of the property consisting of 8.8 acres to PUD, planned unit development.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Yes.
Just a comment real briefly. I think it seems like that the fact that the development team met with the neighborhood paid off in this case. And I want to
commend you guys for doing that. That seems like a good, we don't see that very often.
Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Passes unanimously. Chris, you want to try the second motion?
I'll concur with Mr. Nunn. I was going to make that comment at this point, and I would also like to include the city staff and Mr. Corwin and the development team. There is people here from the neighborhood, and I think we all expected a little bit more excitement than we've seen tonight. So I'm glad to see even the neighborhood has gotten together with the developer and everybody's moving forward. From our perspective, I think it meets all the requirements that we need, and it's going to hopefully be a nice development. With that being said, I will make a motion to approve the preliminary PUD plan with the condition that the handout provided to us regarding the speaker paging system with 3 speakers facing towards Missouri Boulevard with a diagram dated June 13th be a part of that recommendation.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Is approved. Eric, you want to tell these nice people when this thing will come before the city council, they might want to appear there?
Certainly. This particular case is scheduled to be heard by the city council in a public hearing on July 15th in this room, and city council meetings start at 6 p.m. So July 15th.
Okay, thank you. Going on with our agenda, scheduled report. Michael, do you have a report on the Environmental Quality Commission?
I actually was out of town and didn't attend the last one, so I don't really have a formal report. I know from the minutes that they continued to, the commission continued to work on the messaging for the Make Your Mark informational campaign.
Okay. Let's combine A and C here. I've talked to Michael. He has volunteered again to be our representative to the Environmental Quality Commission, so I would entertain a motion that we continue the appointment of Michael Lester as our representative.
So moved.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
There's no opposed. Thank you very, very much, Michael. We appreciate the good work. All right, next thing, B, a schedule election of officers. We elect the chairman, vice chairman, and I believe Eric is our permanent secretary, or he's appointed as our secretary. So at this time, the floor would entertain nominations for the position of chairman.
I feel that everything's going smoothly the way it is, and I don't see any problem with the chairman or unless the chairman wants to sit down. And vice chairman, so other than that, I make a motion that we continue to Rob Head as chairman.
I would second that motion.
Discussion on the motion. I believe that this will be my, if I'm elected, this will be my 3rd year, sir. Is that good or bad? Discussion on that motion. Now, if you approve this motion, you're stuck with Chris and I again. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Thank you. I know that Chris and I will be glad to serve. Just for your information, Ms. McMillan, through her efforts, got me scheduled before the city council, and I went there in last month and gave a brief overview of what the Planning and Zoning Commission does. I was very well received. Unfortunately, our council liaison was late that night. He didn't get to hear our report, not mention any names. But I'm very well received, and there were some nice comments, and I want to commend all of you for giving of your time, your talent, your expertise to come in here, and I've just got to believe this is probably one of the finest, maybe the finest voluntary commission that the council approves in this city. So thank you all for a job well done. I appreciate it. Any other comments?
I agree 100% with your comments, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
We couldn't do it without the wonderful staff here that we have supported. So you guys make us look good. Thank you. All right, hearing nothing else, we're adjourned. Thank you for coming.